Others joined them in their belief as God began to call more to his work in the New World. A second congregation was established at Hopkinton. This soon became a thriving church of several hundred. A bridge today marks the spot where their meeting house once stood. Several thousand were baptized here on the banks of the Pawcatuck River. By the mid-1800s, Sabbath-keeping congregations could be found throughout the Midwest. At Battle Creek, Michigan in 1860, many thousands were persuaded to accept the beliefs of the followers of Ellen G. White, a self-proclaimed prophetess. They adopted the name Seventh-day Adventists, by which name they are known to this day. A number of the Sabbath-keeping churches refused to accept these teachings and doctrines. They moved their headquarters to Marion, Iowa, and then to Stanbury, Missouri. A magazine, The Bible Advocate, was published. Their efforts bore some fruit. Small congregations sprung up across the nation. And so it was that sometime in the 19th century, a small congregation of the True Church of God was established in the peaceful Willamette Valley in Oregon. They were farmers without formal education. They lacked trained ministers to teach and guide them. But they had the name Church of God, and they faithfully kept the Sabbath day. God's church had come a long way across the turbulent centuries since the day of Pentecost. It was weak and lacked influence. Years of persecution and compromise had taken their toll. Much truth had been lost, but they had stayed the course. In the Willamette Valley, they waited. It was nearly time for the baton to change again into the hands of those God would call to do his end-time work. As mankind neared the end of 6,000 years of Satan's misrule of the earth, God's church had to be ready for a new and critical phase of the work. Jesus had prophesied that before the end could come, the true gospel of the kingdom must be preached to all the world as a witness. As man's knowledge increased, the technology began to be developed by which a voice could indeed cry out and be heard around the world. And so, as God had raised up Elijah and John the Baptist as his special messengers, he now raised up a man to work in the power and spirit of Elijah, preparing the way for Christ's second coming. His mission was to restore to God's church the true gospel, which had been suppressed for 1900 years, and to restore the government of God in the church, and prepare Christ's bride for his coming. Herbert W. Armstrong was born July 31st, 1892, in Des Moines, Iowa, of substantial, God-fearing parents. He was the eldest son of Horace Elon Armstrong, who was the eldest son of Nathan Armstrong, who was the eldest son of Samuel Armstrong, who was married to Elizabeth Cope. The family genealogy has been preserved through the Cope Foundation and can be traced back to Princess Joan, the daughter of Edward I, the King of England between 1272 and 1307. And thus through a royal line that can be traced back to King David of ancient Israel. As a young man, from age 18, Herbert Armstrong became unusually successful in the field of magazine and newspaper advertising. At age 25, he was married to Loma Dillon, an Iowa schoolteacher.
Very shortly after our marriage, my wife had a most extraordinarily impressive dream. It was more like a vision. She had never experienced anything like it. She told me that she seemed to be standing on one of the busiest corners in the North Side residential area of Chicago, very near to where we were living at the time. She saw an extraordinary sight up in the heavens. It was first like many giant birds, and then it seemed like one of them was coming closer. And she began to think it was the second coming of Christ. And it finally came on down, and it proved to be an angel. She said she was very much concerned because I had not been religiously interested since I was 18 years of age. And she thought, as she said, that Herbert wasn't saved, and she was afraid that I would be lost. She thought this was the second coming of Christ. And it proved to be an angel. A great crowd was gathering all around them. It seemed like there were hundreds upon hundreds of people that had seen this sight, and they were all coming up closer. The angel came on down, and to her surprise, he put his arm around both her and me. And she said that she had thought it was the second coming of Christ, and he said, no, but it will be somewhat soon. And he told her that God had something for us to do. He had a work for us to do, that he needed me. And she was surprised. And then the angel seemed to vanish, and later she came out of the vision, or awakened, or whatever. She told me the dream. I was embarrassed. I had not been interested since 18 years of age. Although I'd been brought up in Sunday school and church, I had not been religiously interested. I was interested in business. And I wanted to get it out of my mind because of my embarrassment. There was a church just half a block down on the corner. I suggested that she go tell the dream to the minister of the church. Maybe he could tell her what it meant, if it meant anything. I didn't know. I wanted to get it out of my mind. And like Jonah, if that was a call from God, I wanted to run away. I went on back to business. Now that was in 1917. In business, I continued to succeed, and by 1920, when I was 28 years of age, I was making what would be the equivalent in today's inflated dollar value, the equivalent of at least about $300,000 or more dollars a year income. And then, all of a sudden, I had run away from God, and now God took everything away from me. In the flash depression of 1920, it came suddenly. And all of my big clients went into receivership. That included such corporations as the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, the J.I. Case Plow Works, the Moline Plow Works, John Deere and Company, and companies of that sort. All went into the receivership. My business was utterly just swept out from under my feet through no cause of my own at all. Later, we went on to the West Coast in Oregon. I finally managed to begin to get back on my feet and to establish an advertising service for laundries. Now, at that time, I found the laundry industry was the 12th largest industry in the United States and perhaps the most backward. However, I had organized an advertising service that was doubling the business of my clients. And all of a sudden, the Laundry Owners National Association had the power to obligate every laundry member to a nationally advertised campaign in such publications as Ladies' Home Journal and Woman's Home Companion, McCall's, and other magazines of that sort, just throwing it all where it was doing our local laundries no good whatsoever, but it took all their advertising appropriation.